Naomi and Audrey Bellonier had already learned how to travel without fear. They had spent weeks moving through Vietnam, navigating unfamiliar cities, unfamiliar languages, unfamiliar routines, and nothing had gone wrong. By the time they reached Thailand, travel no longer felt like an experiment. It felt ordinary. They knew how to read people. They knew how to leave situations early. They had rules for themselves, even if they didn't always talk about them. Naomi, the older sister, watched more closely. Audrey trusted more easily. Between them, the balance worked. The hotel they checked into did not raise concern. It looked like many others they had stayed in, clean enough, busy enough, forgettable in the way temporary places often are. Naomi checked the bed, the sheets, the corners of the room. This was something she did everywhere. Audrey teased her for it, but waited anyway. Nothing seemed wrong. That first evening felt light. They planned to go out. They were meeting two Brazilian men they had encountered earlier in their travels. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't secretive. They had talked before. They had spent time together. This was how travel friendships worked. Nothing about the night suggested danger. That was the problem. The beach was busy. Music drifted from bars. Tourists moved in loose groups, laughing, drinking, dancing without urgency. Oversized plastic buckets filled with colorful liquid were everywhere. They were common here. Almost expected. The drinks were strong. Too strong. Naomi noticed quickly. Her vision felt off. The sensation wasn't just drunkenness. It felt heavier, slower, as if something inside her was misfiring. She registered the thought and pushed it aside. Travel teaches you to normalize discomfort. Audrey drank more confidently. She always had. She trusted her body. She trusted the moment. Naomi watched her, like she always did, but didn't intervene. Nothing obvious was wrong. Hours passed without markers. Dancing blurred into standing, standing into sitting. Eventually, Naomi decided she needed to leave. She felt wrong in a way she couldn't name. One of the men offered to walk her back to the hotel. Audrey stayed behind with the other. This was unusual. They rarely separated at night. But it didn't feel dangerous, just different. They hugged. They promised to meet later. They didn't know this was the last normal decision they would make. Naomi returned to the hotel room. She lay down on the bed she had already checked. The room was quiet. No noise from the hallway. No strange smells. No visible warning. She assumed Audrey would return later. Audrey never did. What happened in the hours after remains mostly unrecorded. No witnesses. No phone calls. No camera footage that answers the right questions. Audrey eventually returned to the room, but no one knows exactly when or how she felt when she arrived. There was no call for help. There was no alarm. For 3 days, the room stayed closed. Hotel staff assumed the sisters were resting or out. This was common. Tourists came and went constantly. No one checked. No one knocked with urgency. When the room was finally entered, both sisters were found in their beds. The scene was quiet. Almost peaceful. But wrong. At first, everything pointed to alcohol poisoning. Vomit. Disorientation. A night of heavy drinking. It was an explanation that required no further digging. But small details disrupted that conclusion. Blood around the gums. Blood beneath fingernails. Not enough to suggest violence. Just enough to prevent certainty. Police ordered autopsies. Toxicology tests. They reviewed security footage. The Brazilian men were identified as the last people seen with the sisters. Their names circulated quietly at first. The men were located through Interpol. They cooperated. They described the night consistently. They expressed shock. They reported becoming sick themselves after the encounter, not dead, but unwell enough to notice something was wrong. That detail mattered later. For now, investigators kept looking in familiar places. When toxicology results returned, alcohol was not the cause of death. Instead, a chemical appeared in both sister systems, one associated with pesticides. A substance not regulated in the way travelers expect. Something that does not belong in food or drinks. Investigators considered contamination. The notorious 4x100 drinks sold locally sometimes contained dangerous additives. That explanation almost worked. But it didn't explain everything. The dosage didn't align. The timeline didn't align. The way the sisters died, slowly, without obvious distress, didn't align. The investigation turned back to the hotel. Bedbugs were common in the area. Hotels treated them aggressively. Quietly. Often illegally. Investigators learned that the hotel had recently sprayed rooms with a pesticide capable of releasing phosphine gas. The treatment was meant to kill insects quickly. It was not meant for occupied rooms. It was not meant to linger. But it did. Phosphine gas is colorless. Odorless. It does not announce itself. It seeps. It accumulates. It enters through skin and lungs while people sleep. Naomi and Audrey stayed in the room. 4 hours. The men did not. That difference mattered. The conclusion arrived quietly. No courtroom. No arrests. No public reckoning. The sisters died from prolonged exposure to illegal pesticide gas. Not from violence. Not from intent. From a practice that existed because no one asked too many questions. The families demanded accountability. Governments requested further investigation. Anger followed. But responsibility dissolved into procedure. No one was charged. The hotel continued operating. The room returned to service. This story is unsettling not because of what happened at the end, but because of how much time passed before anyone realized what had been happening at all. Nothing about the trip felt reckless. Nothing about the night felt threatening. Nothing about the room suggested danger. The most lethal element was the one designed to be unnoticed. And once that settles in, the story stops being about Naomi and Audrey alone. It becomes about how often safety is assumed, how rarely it is explained, and how many systems rely on silence rather than protection. Their deaths were not mysterious because they were unknown. They were mysterious because they were hidden inside something ordinary, and stayed there long enough to be fatal. That is why the story lingers. Not because of what happened, but because of how easily it could have happened to anyone else.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more amazing stories on our channel. See you soon.